How do the new Callaway Paradym irons perform? Let's go find out.
So the Callaway Paradym irons are one of two of the iron offerings in the new Callaway Paradym range.
Now there's also a Paradym X, which is going to be like their super game improvement offering, but we haven't got our hands on that yet. So today we're just going to be testing the main Paradym option. And I think it's a seriously good looking club. If you looked at that on the shelf, I just don't think you would have assumed it's in this category.
It looks quite a bit smaller than a standard player's distance iron.
And some of that comes down to the technology, which is kind of a story that's fed through the whole Paradym range this year. So we've got a hollow body construction here. A lot of that allows for more face flexion, because if the centre of the club is hollow, the face can obviously bend more, we can get more ball speeds. We've got a lot of tungsten weighting in here, and especially you can see that in the toe. That's going to help turn the club over a little bit, hopefully be a little bit draw bias for people who want to get the ball moving right to left a little bit more, but also because there's weight load, this is going to launch a bit easier than normal clubs. So let's see just how it performs. I've been really easy on myself and started with 5 iron, even though I hate hitting 5 irons. So let's see how this goes. Generally I'd look to hit a 5 iron in the 170s, probably 174. Let's see if we can get some more distance out of this. I actually really like the way this sits behind the ball. Went straight, wasn't my best strike. Straight off 176 yard carry out of a shot that I didn't even strike my best. Interesting, it's actually spun a decent amount, 4,900, which for a 5 iron with hollow body construction, generally these are going to spin less. I actually just have a really nice high ball flight. I hate hitting 5 irons. I feel like it's the hardest club to hit out of that typical 5 to pitch and wedge set, and this feels pretty easy to hit and launch, and that's carried 181 yards, which is long for a 5 iron. That's almost breaching into the 4 iron 4 hybrid territory. But then I guess if you're someone who doesn't hit it far enough and you want a little bit extra distance, that's really good, because it's it's definitely giving you more distance and more ball speed. That's come out at 124 mile an hour in terms of ball speed, 4,600 spin, height 92, and from 83 mile an hour club head speed, which isn't massively quick. Okay, I've blocked that a little bit, so it's interesting to see how much that affects the distance. 179, that's still pretty good. Well, still longer than I would hit my 5 iron on average. And this is always the point in testing where I think why do I use a 5 iron that matches my set? It would be so much easier to use something like this, which is more consistent, because even if this is slightly longer than what I want now, you could always mess with the lofts to get it to fit in your bag. And obviously I think if you weaken this as well, you could get a little bit more height out of it as well, which would really help in terms of control and stopping power. This is flying at 91 feet, so you're still going to get a pretty good level of control with that. I'm surprised just how consistent the spin's been so far as well. It's only varied by 400 RPM across all the shots, which is pretty consistent. That was really nice. I reckon that's going to be my longest. Yeah. 182.3. The performance with this is really good. It's going to be interesting to see if it's just as consistent throughout the bag. Let's go hit some 7 irons and see how we get on with them. Okay, so a 155 from the pin. I've got the 7 iron. That's my general 7 iron distance, but I feel these could go a bit longer because they're a much bigger style of club. But what I like about these is they're quite compact in terms of the blade length, so they don't look really massively big over the ball, and also there's quite minimal offset, which I think is really nice. Now the top line is pretty chunky, but I think on this kind of club, having something like that, it just feels a little bit more forgiving, and it's a little bit more confidence inspiring for someone who's not necessarily as good of a ball striker. Now these clubs are really shiny, which is something I've noticed. You can literally use them as a mirror. But then the middle centre of the grooves is matte, and that also wrap rounds as part of the face cup onto the top line, so you do kind of get this two-tone top line, which makes it look a little bit slimmer. How far will these go given I've literally got 5 layers on? Okay, I definitely pulled that a bit, but it's gone pretty good distance. Carried 162 when it was 40 feet left. That was my fault. But in terms of the height, just under 80 feet, 113 ball speed, Spin at 5,400, which might sound low for a 7-iron, but in terms of like a hollow body construction iron, that's pretty good actually. What I actually like here is this has a nice high ball flight, but it's not excessively high. They get so much weight kind of low down that you get a really high launching club. I feel like they've balanced things well here to have like the right loft relative to the weight and the CG location, so you do get a nice high ball flight, but it's not ridiculously high. There's an interesting kind of blend of different technologies here. So this is a hollow body golf club, and the reason for that is you can get more face flexion, you can get more ball speed, you can get more distance. To balance that out, Callaway use urethane microspheres on the side of the club head, and that's designed to like absorb some of the shock so it feels a little better. But also the club face is actually forged in this, so the whole club isn't forged, but the club face section is. And actually, when you strike these out in the middle, you do get a really nice feel off them. It's obviously not exactly the same as a fully forged club, but it is nice. I would say on off-centre strikes, it feels a little bit more kind of harsh and a bit dull. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because if you hit it off-centre, like, I think you should know about it rather than it all like feeling the same everywhere. Oh, that was nice. Now these are pretty fast when you hit them good, like that's ended up flying 162 off 81 mile an hour of club head speed, which is pretty good. The height was nice, 92 feet. So if you're someone who wants a little bit of extra height, I think these are going to help. Spin 5,800, so you can see on those good shots the spin is getting up a little bit, which is going to help you with that kind of control and getting the ball to stop on the green. 172 total. That's going a long way if you need it to. Now I'd say generally I like to look at like 154 carry distance for my 7-iron. So you're looking at like 9 yards longer. You're definitely looking for more distance. I think these are great. And what I like is the fact that they're not massive. Like this, you don't look over this and think, oh, this is a really chunky big club, but actually they're giving you pretty good dispersion and pretty good distance. So you're getting like a good balance of, you don't have to have something that looks really massive behind the golf ball, but you are getting that kind of forgiveness and speed, which is obviously key. Okay, last up, 9-iron. So it's interesting to see if this can keep up with the distance of the others. Surely at some point they've got to get shorter. Now, what's quite weird actually is behind the ball, this is a lot more rounded than the other ones, especially in the toe section. It's quite a big difference in terms of shaping. It almost looks like how when you get to like a lob wedge and it's really a lot more rounded. Launch is very high. Pretty nice though. I actually feel like this feels even nicer than the other ones. It's carried 138.9, so a bit of a bigger gap I'd say between this and the 7-iron than the 7 and the 9. Generally I'd look at my 9-iron being like 134, just like 4 or 5 yards longer. Maybe not quite as big as 9 that we've seen in some of the others, but then I think as you go down the bag you're gonna see less gains. Pulled that a little bit. Still launching high though. They're getting up in the 90 feet, and from like 76 club head speed that carried 141 yards, so very good again in terms of distance. Spin rate quite low, so that's under 6,000, probably like the lowest of any of them we've seen so far, and that's been like, to be fair, that one was probably a bit lower than the others. The others were in the 7,000s, maybe just because I pulled it a little bit. That was straighter. Super consistent. I feel like all these shots have basically like gone through the same like flight window, which is very unusual. High 89 again, so still very consistent. Spin rate's back up 7,400, that's definitely a little bit better. Carry 134. Overall, this has just been ridiculously consistent. I've been doing this weird thing recently where I've been having better dispersion with a 5-iron than a 9-iron, but this one's actually pretty tight. Now overall I'd say they've performed pretty well. I mean I hit a lot more shots with the 7-iron, so the dispersion looks bigger, but generally I'm pretty happy with like the gapping we've seen through the bag there, and like the front to back dispersion is pretty consistent throughout this set too, which I think a lot of people think as soon as you get a bit more ball speed there's going to be no consistency at all, which is definitely not what we've seen here. They're definitely long. I would say these like a half a club to a club longer than the clubs I normally use. So you're definitely getting a lot more distance here. So if that's something that's really important to you, definitely worth looking at this model. I think my favourite thing is, one, the dispersion's not massive either front to back or left to right. Two, it's pretty neutral.
Like a lot of players' distance model,
really left bias, which is fine if you're someone who slices it or hits a fade, but not everyone does. So if you want something that's a little bit more neutral, that's really nice. We can see it's pretty straight down the target line. If you do want something that's a bit more draw biased, I think you're probably best going into the X model that Callaway are bringing out as well. So these are great for distance, definitely really good in terms of height if you want something that launched a little bit higher, but also these were super consistent in terms of height throughout the different irons and throughout the testing, which I think is important, because yes, you want the extra distance and forgiveness, but you also want something that's consistent and you know what it's going to do when you're hitting into the green. The last thing I really just love about these is, one, they're great looking from behind the club. But with this you kind of get that blend, because you've got that distance and forgiveness, but you've got a club that looks straight and also isn't massive behind the golf ball. So it's kind of winning on like all levels. I really think like I wouldn't be far away from gaming something like this. I think these are going to do pretty well this year.